Westfall is a fiefdom of the Kingdom of Stormwind and was once its breadbasket. Ravaged by the Old Horde during the Second War, this rich lands of rolling pastures and farms were once beautiful and green, until they were afflicted by drought and the mistreatment inflicted by the Defiers Brotherhood, an organization of former stonemasons who became bandits under the command of Edwin Van Cleef. The grass is yellowed, the fields are infested with ravenous carrion birds and mechanical harvest watchers who have gone rogue, and years of neglect and conflict have not improved the situation. After years of corruption and internal political conflicts caused by the Black Dragon Onyxia, Stormwind has been working hard to secure and renovate the region. The Westfall Brigade, under the leadership of Marshal Brian Stoutmantle, formerly known as the People's Militia, erected a bastion of military power in the region at Sentinel Hill, from where they issue commands to anyone willing to aid the cause, and thus succeeded in defeating the Defiers Brotherhood. Although most of the area's farms have fallen to disrepair, there are still farmers who bravely cling to their holdings. Following the cataclysm, discontent roared in Westfall, where many people living became homeless and bankrupt as a result of the costs of the campaign in North Rend. Now inhabited by transients, homeless citizens and drifters, the Defiers Brotherhood made a resurgence under the leadership of Vanessa Van Cleef, daughter and successor of Edwin, and attempted to rally the discontented masses in Moonbrook. While they managed to burn Sentinel Hill to the ground, they were once again defeated by the adventurers and the forces of the Stormwind army. In the years that followed, the kingdom continued to support the region, waging a war against banditry and the Riverpaw Pack Gnolls. Following his coronation, King Anduin Rin's reforms brought more aid to the region, which extinguished the spark of the revolution. He also gave the royal pardon and reparations to the former stonemasons and their families hidden in the region, allowing them to end their life of banditry and return to Stormwind City. The Breadbasket Guild was later formed by the farmers to revitalize the region with the support of the kingdom. Centuries ago, throughout the Eastern Kingdoms, the disparate human nations flourished. Among them, the smallest and most isolated of the kingdoms was Stormwind. Over the years, it found prosperity through the farmsteads that dotted the surrounding fertile region, and as its population grew, small towns sprang up in the nearby regions, notably Westfall, which became the breadbasket of the kingdom. Teku. During the reign of King Barathan Rin, the Gnolls began launching brazen attacks on Stormwind City, but it quickly became clear that these assaults were merely distractions. While soldiers defended the city against a large number of enemies, they could only send a few troops to protect the agricultural lands, and Westfall farmsteads were burned during what was called the Gnoll War. At the end of the war, the Gnolls were wiped out following the death of their leader, and the kingdom regained control of its lands, which were rebuilt. Years later, a Gurubashi trolls raiding party slipped through Stormwind's patrol lines and cut a path of destruction through Westfall, burning 3 towns to the ground. Stormwind soldiers eventually caught and slew the raiders, but it was too late for dozens of humans, and their deaths were gruesome. 4-4. This sparked talks among the Stormwind leadership, which then led to the Gurubashi War. Eventually, during the First War, the war chief Blackhand ordered raiding parties to cut deep into Stormwind's lands as he wanted to drive the human populace to panic. Entire villages in Westfall fell to the Old Horde's control, with their inhabitants either killed or forced to flee. 6. Following the Second War, the territories of Stormwind were reclaimed by the alliance of Lordaeron and the returning Stormwindians, with the help of the Supreme Commander Turalyon, who oversaw the efforts to repatriate the kingdom's citizens and to secure Varian Rin's place as the next king. 7. Rise of the Defiers. After the Stonemasons Guild spent years toiling to rebuild Stormwind City, they were left broke, as their fees and salaries were left unpaid and unspoken for by the city's officials. When the time of the rightful payment came, the nobles of Stormwind couldn't, because they ran up a huge debt by expanding the kingdom's military presence through Elwyn and into Stranglethorn, and the massive debt crippled the kingdom's economy. 80. In the shadow, Lady Katrana Presta manipulated both sides with the Drakefire amulet. Her meddling in the rebuilding of Stormwind left the nobility unsatisfied with the craftsmanship of the guild, while the workers were enraged that the nobility despised them and were threatening to withhold payment. 9. When the guildmaster Edwin Van Cleef spoke out, demanding restitution for their works, the House of Nobles ordered the guild disbanded, and it turned into a heated dispute, which resulted in riots that led to the murder of Queen Tiffin Ryn. 10. In response, King Varian Ryn vowed to punish those responsible and dealt with the rioters more severely. 12. The stonemasons, fleeing the city, hid in the rural areas of Westfall to escape prosecution. Knowing Varian's anger would never fade, many were forced to remain in hiding. 13. From the shadows, Onyxia continued to stoke their rage by using her influence to cut off supplies and support to the region. They became the terrorist organization known as the Defias Brotherhood, and under Edwin Van Cleef's reign, they turned to banditry and murder to recover the gold owed to them. While Lady Presta's political machinations caused chaos in the kingdom, the Defias sowed anarchy and terror in the lands of Stormwind for the next decade. Consequently, Westfall started to grow fallow after years of conflict, and neglect had diminished its harvests. Crops could eventually no longer be cultivated in the fields, and the once abundant mines were ultimately deserted. Even the former defenders from the Stormwind Guard pulled stake and abandoned the lonely realm when the cost of upkeep became too great. Over the years, the ranks of the Brotherhood grew to include the skilled, the desperate, and the outcast. Journey of Bran. Following the Third War, the dwarf Bran Bronzebeard travelled south from Khazmodan to survey the lands of Azeroth. When he came to Westfall, he was surprised at finding only abandoned farms and countless acres of abandoned cropland. He later inspected a few of the scattered, lonely farms, and only found a few discarded mementos of the humans who had once toiled ceaselessly over the region. When he arrived at the abandoned mining town named Moonbrook, he fought agents of the Defias Brotherhood and a harvest golem, and left Westfall in the direction of Stranglethorn Vale. 15. At some point, James Blackridge, Liam and Bram Woodring went fishing in Westfall. As they had no luck with the fishes, they moved to Westfall Lighthouse, where they discovered the Bloodsail Buccaneers crew led by Jerius Bloodvein. The Bloodsails abducted them and trained them to be pirates. When the pirate crew returned to Westfall after a few months, they marched to Moonbrook and invaded the Dead Mines in hopes to enact vengeance on Edwin Van Cleef and the Defias Brotherhood. In order to rescue his parents, among the prisoners, James faced and killed in a duel the pirate captain that had captured them. The rescued prisoners were then escorted to Sentinel Hill, and the young man was certain that with Bloodvein dead, the Bloodsails would not return to Westfall. Due to this lack of military protection, Westfall was all but destroyed by the rebel Defias Brotherhood. The Brotherhood, composed mainly of thieves and bandits, easily took control of the poorly defended farmlands, driving off many of the good farm folk, and made Westfall their new refuge. Needing a secure location to oversee the construction of a massive juggernaut, their weapon to destroy Stormwind City from the sea, Edwin Van Cleef chose the Dead Mines as his base of operations, an abandoned mining network hidden beneath a barn in Moonbrook. With Westfall under his control, Edwin Van Cleef took advantage of the resources at his disposal and used his considerable manpower to run many of the farmers off and took over the handful of gold mines. He made a deal with the Riverpoor pack gnolls, hiring them as thugs and stationing them throughout Westfall. 18. In order to further hurt the people of Westfall, they also began burning the farmers' fields and salting the earth to prevent them from growing crops. With the addition of goblins to the Brotherhood's ranks, their armaments grew to include harvest golems, which they programmed to hunt down and terminate the human inhabitants of Westfall. These mechanical monstrosities did their job well, as they elicited terror in anyone foolish enough to roam the fallow fields of Westfall alone. Only the people's militia rose up to stand in their way. Considering that Stormwind had abandoned their cause, Brian Stoutmantle founded this volunteer military organization in order to keep the land free from corruption. In his efforts to defend the people of Westfall, he recruited the young heroes of the Alliance and sent them to eliminate large numbers of defiers spotted by his scouts across the region. 22. In order to help, Matthias Shaw also directed SI, 7 reconnaissance operations on the Brotherhood activities, and later sent Agent Kiernan in Westfall to spy on Claven's tower. Once they found that the leaders of the Defias Brotherhood were hiding in the dead mines beneath Moonbrook, Stoutmantle called upon the heroes of the Alliance to destroy the Brotherhood and Edwin at their head. With support from Stoutmantle's soldiers, the heroes succeeded and Westfall was safe once again. At the time of the Scourge War, the People's Militia renamed themselves the Westfall Brigade and joined the Valiance expedition in Northrend. Following the fall of the Lich King and their tour of duty, the brigade returned home to Westfall, where they found that the cost of the war had left thousands homeless, who then migrated to Westfall to squat on many of the abandoned properties. During the war against the Lich King, Lee Stormstout and Strongbow came to Westfall on their journey to find Chen Stormstout. Prior to the cataclysm, the People's Militia forces who remained in Westfall were mobilized to bring order and defeat the last remaining defiers. According to one of their officers, morale was rather low among the troops, consisting mostly of militiamen and not soldiers, which sometimes led to conflicts for food. The mage Carlane and the priest Reveal Cost teamed up in a camp of the People's Militia, and together they traveled to Gold Coast Quarry to find Tanos. A group of the Defiers Brotherhood was patrolling the area, and soon they ambushed Tanos and the others. The presence of Tanos's artifact drew the attention of the Dark Riders into Westwall as well, so when the Defiers were defeated, the Dark Riders suddenly appeared, killed Tanos, and took the hand of Azora. Reveal then proceeded to track them to Duskwood. After the campaign in Northrend, Westfall reported tidal waves and storms. Many people living in Westfall became homeless and bankrupt, and those who weren't in a military occupation faced especially hard times. Westfall is now inhabited by transients, homeless Stormwind citizens, and drifters. The farmlands are still reeling from years of neglect and desolation. The Westfall Brigade, having returned from the war in Northrend, fortified Sentinel Hill and started working on cleaning up the mess left behind by the Defias Brotherhood, expanding the reach of the Alliance and maintaining order with the full support of King Varian Rin. The cataclysm created a large sinkhole named the Raging Chasm, located in the western part of Westfall between the Molson Farm and the Alixton farmstead, who were partially devoured by the disaster. Consequently, many farmers under Thurman Grant left Westfall in order to try and resettle the newly cleansed lands in the Western Plaguelands. The kingdom later sent supplies, troops and siege engines in hopes of rebuilding the former breadbasket of the kingdom and to house the citizens of Stormwind whose homes were destroyed by the cataclysm. While they sought to secure the region and restore it to its former glory, the resurgence of an old and familiar enemy hinder their efforts. In the shadow, the Defiers Brotherhood made a resurgence, primarily due to growing resentment of Stormwind's leadership among the people of Westfall, the cause of which was poverty among the people and a perceived indifference to this poverty by the king. Edwin Van Cleef's daughter, Vanessa, took the leadership of the Defiers and had been encouraging the anti-Stormwind sentiment among the people of Westfall, recruiting new allies to aid her in their vengeance against the kingdom. The Brotherhood then mounted a surprise attack on Sentinel Hill and burned it virtually to the ground. Following a large conflict between the Stormwind army and the Brotherhood, a force of Alliance heroes entered once again the Deadmines, where they wiped out all the new Defiers' leadership. Eventually, they confronted Vanessa herself atop the rebuilt Juggernaut, and faced with defeat, she detonated a series of explosions which essentially blow up her and the ship, ending her plans and the activities of the Brotherhood in Westfall. During the third invasion of the Burning Legion, the Legion targeted Westfall as one of their invasion points, ravaging the region with their armies of demons, while some Nathrazim enslaved its inhabitants. Under the leadership of Gryan Stoutmantle, Westfall was successfully defended by the Stormwind army with the help of the adventurers of the Alliance and Horde and the Illidari, the latter having temporarily installed one of their camps before leaving once the assaults and demons repelled. Among the defenders, some farmhands acted like militias. They took up weapons to defend themselves and repel demons, thus indicating that farmers are still present to work in Westfall. At this time, all members of the Defiers Brotherhood had left the region, and the Deadmines fell silent. During his exploration of the Eastern Kingdoms, the spymaster Matthias Shaw reported that the transients who arrived here after the cataclysm continued to come and go, this time unsettled by a massive war, not a world's breaking. However, Shaw noted that they provide a rich source of rumors for SI-7 to investigate. While Sentinel Hill was being rebuilt and fortified, the Westfall Brigade worked with the SI-7 to maintain order in the region, stop troublemakers, and keep at bay the packs of disordered gnolls since Hogger's death. The Raging Chasm was also reported to be still present and active in the region. In the years that followed the Burning Legion's defeat, Vanessa Van Cleef had an agreement with Matthias Shaw. While she kept the Defiers Brotherhood on a short leash, the SI-7 wouldn't come after them for their crimes, though she tried to rein in their banditry to focus on aiding the people of Westfall, King Anduin. Rin's reforms allowed more aid and resources to arrive at Westfall, which caused the spark of revolution to fade. The young king also offered pardons and reparations for former stonemasons and their families, who therefore left their life of banditry and returned to Stormwind City as citizens, leaving the Brotherhood with only the thieves and bullies with no qualms about targeting innocents. Sometime after the discovery of the Dragon Isles, a disgraced noble named Count Clessington convinced the remaining Defiers in Westfall to turn against Vanessa. He ordered them to steal the Drakefire amulet from Stormwind Keep and sent a few of his attendants to Moonbrook in order to get rid of those who would get in his way. In the Deadmines, Count Clessington and Duncan Ratsburn used the artifact's powers to convince the Defiers to turn against Vanessa and march on Northshire Abbey, with the aim of using it as a staging ground to pillage Stormwind City itself. Seeing how easily a corrupted noble turned the Brotherhood against her, Vanessa realized that she was no longer one of them. She left the ranks of the Brotherhood and told her remaining loyal Defiers to return home to their families, as this fight was no longer theirs, and that they should help the people of Westfall in other ways. Later, the Breadbasket Guild was created by a gathering of Westfall farmers, former Defiers members, and war refugees who sought to help Westfall and its inhabitants. They are good people trying to do right by each other, notably by working the farms again and to get proper homes built for folks. With the help and support of Countess Cecilia Clessington in the House of Nobles, their organization was formalized to request support from the kingdom. Once a proud land of farmers and herders, Westfall became a wasteland, largely because of the thieves who usurped it. Weeds and seedling trees mark the rich land, and the wind cries over the fields. The Defias Brotherhood were the greatest threat to farmers and travelers, but after their defeat, it is now mainly the gnolls and the slouching harvest golems that threaten the region. There is one instanced dungeon, the Dead Mines, that can be found in Westfall. No other dungeons or battlegrounds can be found here. Westfall is home to several humans of note. Queen Tiffin Rin belonged to the Illyrian noble family of Stormwind, a small house that only had a small chunk of land in Westfall. At Sentinel Hill, a paladin of the Silver Hand named Gryan Stoutmantle leads the Westfall Brigade and sends promising adventurers of the Alliance to rid the land of any threat. He is assisted in his efforts by Captain Danuvin, who also seeks to rid Westfall of the vile Riverpaw gnolls. The Dead Mines were once the headquarters of the Defias Brotherhood, led by Edwin Van Cleef, the former guildmaster of the Stonemasons Guild. He was killed at the hands of adventurers sent by Gryan Stoutmantle, and years later was replaced by his daughter Vanessa Van Cleef. She was also defeated by the heroes, but managed to escape by faking her death with hallucinogens and explosives. At the Westfall Lighthouse, the ghostly Captain Grayson recruits adventurers to make Longshore a safer place to venture. Peaceful inhabitants of Westfall find it a frightening place to live after recent events. While the Defias Brotherhood hatches its schemes to hurt Stormwind, the Alliance and all beholden to it, Westfall's simple folk just try to live from day to day, with thieves, bandits and gnolls threatening them. The thieves and bandits find it a large area in which they can plan their attacks without much bother. Little fun and celebration occur among Westfall's inhabitants, as they have poor community support and hardly any aid from Stormwind. The garrison at Sentinel Hill is nothing more than a Stormwind figurehead. The thieves of the Brotherhood, on the other hand, apparently live a fine life. Only a few Brotherhood members live in Moonbrook, presumably acting as sentries. The bulk of the population occupies the Dead Mines, which the Brotherhood has converted into an underground fortress. All other Azeroth territories taken out of Alliance control had the Horde, the Undead, or the Demons behind them. Westfall fell to bitter humans soon after the Second War. The Defias Brotherhood, led by Edwin Van Cleef, attempted to take Elwyn Forest but failed. Its members chose Westfall as their new home, and the farmers, still shaken from the Horde attacks, put up little resistance. The Brotherhood found that the time to steal land from their own accepted ruler was when he was too concerned with orcs, undead and demons to realize that a good chunk of the continent was gone. The rulers at Stormwind, even with knowledge of the Brotherhood's actions, considered other threats to be higher priorities and figured they'd get to Westfall eventually. They do not know the true threat Westfall presents, or even how much the city would miss the agricultural tributes the farmers made.